Welcome back to Ritualizing Rest and to part 2 of our episode of connecting to ancestral wisdom and seasonal approaches to living. I am really excited to be joined today by my lovely friend and guest. With me today is Christina Francisca Haas, also known as the Ancestral Homekeeper. And she is a mother, writer, and creator. In addition to homeschooling her 2 children, Christina writes a weekly Substack letter and has a YouTube channel dedicated to sharing glimpses inside of her home in Northern California, where she practices slow living with her family and animals in this modern society. Christina is dedicated to blending the wisdom of our ancestors with modern understandings of self-nurturing and emotional health. So I feel like you are a perfect person to be here today to talk about this and have these conversations and just share your personal experience. I'm just excited to be inspired by you and what you've been practicing. And I feel like every time we talk, I learn something. So welcome. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Kat. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here in this lovely space with you.
Well, thank you. I'm excited that you are here and that you said yes to having this conversation recorded. I feel like we talk about probably everything here quite often in some way or another. So it's kind of fun to have like a little more structure to these topics. So I feel like it's going to be pretty good.
I'm excited.
Yay. So I think it would be fun just before we dive too much in here to hear a little bit about your work in the world as far as like it relates to kind of slower living and connecting with the ancestors in your work and the work that you put out in your creativity. And I just think it'd be nice to hear a little bit about your passion for this topic. And I know that you have a lot of experiences. And I feel like maybe just starting with how this is showing up for you right now and where you are in the world with taking more of a seasonal approach and looking to connect to wisdom from
Yeah.
beyond.
Um, I think that this work just kind of came about um as a way for me to like I couldn't hold it all in anymore and I needed a way um to sort of make sense of living in this like modern era. I think when I was younger growing up, I always felt like this disconnect. I felt a disconnect from uh, like my ancestors, disconnect from family, definitely a disconnect from the seasons. And I always wanted to, live in fairy tales. And I loved stories and all kinds of stories, from Europe, all the Grimm's fairy tales and all the things with the falling leaves in the fall and the snow in the winter. And growing up in Northern California in the Bay Area, we don't have snow. We don't really have like falling leaves in the autumn. It's a lovely place and I don't want to like knock it or anything, but it's not the typical seasonal living. We have pretty mild winters, mild fall, mild spring. Summers can now with climate change get really really hot. So it's definitely I was a little disconnected. So I think I always grew up feeling um, that sense of like longing for nature to guide me, and like I said, there was a disconnect between me and my family, my grandparents, great grandparents, and all that. So when I got older and had kids of my own, I wanted to create a life for them that was more in tune with the seasons, that was more in tune with the earth around us, that was more in tune with um the way our ancestors may have lived. Of course, it's not like we're Amish. We have I drive a minivan. I believe in Instant Pots so
What does
firmly I have two of
ancestral
them.
does this ancestral living mean you're basically Amish?
Right. People do. People think that. And I actually get comments on my YouTube sometimes where they're like, talking about slow living and she's pulling out an Instant Pot or, and I'm like, yeah, because one of the things the Instant Pot allows me to do is like spend time with my children. I get to
Just
like
slow
push some
down.
buttons on a machine and then I get to go read to my kids for an hour. Like that is slow living in a modern era. So I really try to like think about the wisdom that our ancestors had, that they had to be sustainable because they couldn't just wreck the land that they were living on because they needed that land to
Yeah.
survive. So they had to farm the land sustainably. That is like a little nugget of ancestral wisdom that I feel like our modern day society has
Yes.
forgotten. Even though we can have new technologies and modern health and we've had a lot of progress in sort of mental health and accepting differences and things that like our ancestors never got to experience. But along with a lot of these like modern understandings of the world, modern science, we've forgotten some of those pieces of ancestral wisdom. So I really wanted to create a life for my kids that was more aligned and that was more seasonal and that like things that for them to learn things that like we should have been taught when we were kids, that maybe our parents were never taught or their parents were never taught, but generations before them had knowledge passed down and passed down and passed down. And it's only with like the birth of capitalism really that we have this big divorce happening where we just didn't, that those chains were broken, those knowledge keepers were lost, and now we find ourselves, eating asparagus in December and just having no
No
connection
connection to,
to what
yeah.
seasonality, because everything is available to us at all times, and
Yeah.
so that's the long answer to to that
Well,
question.
yep, true. Something I noticed in the beginning of your response is even when, you're younger and you're living where you're living, I don't know, I don't remember that you have experience living anywhere else really before California. That was really where you grew up. So to not have much of a history in any other place, but to have this longing
Mm-hmm.
for, like you said, that magical autumn season that maybe we see in movies with the leaves
Mm-hmm.
and the trees and the coziness. I feel like when I was listening to, I'm reminded of being young and yeah, you don't know why or where it's coming from or what it is, maybe even, but just these feelings. I know, and just I think for me it just even and now as an adult I'll recognize this as like yeah my soul is like remembering, but like seeing like snow-capped
Mm-hmm.
mountains and
Mm-hmm.
like green meadows with snow-capped mountains. I think you and I have a lot of the same ancestry
Mm-hmm.
roots where we come from, and I love to just notice how it shows up even if we might not have any real life experience with that now, but
Yeah.
how we seek it out too, right? Because a lot
Yeah.
of the books that I read, I feel like Heidi and, these
Mm-hmm.
books like take us
Mm-hmm.
to those places.
Yeah.
So I love just hearing how even when you're young, there was just this, maybe even like an aching.
Yeah. Yeah, there was, I mean, it's funny that you mentioned books because for me as a kid, books for several reasons were my primary form of escape. And, I had an unhappy home life in childhood and books were just like the only way out. And I remember reading Heidi and like I know I have ancestors that come from the Alps, and my mother was born in Bavaria, so like there was a very clear connection there, and I just that longing of like your soul knows, your soul remembers, your body remembers, even if you didn't grow up there. And
Yeah.
so, when I turned 18, I didn't go to college right away. I actually went to Germany and lived there for a year and had my first experience living in like a more seasonal place that had proper seasons, and it was a shock for sure, and I was like walking around in my little jacket in September. That would have been like enough for me in California for the whole winter. But in September, I was like, oh, it's cold,
Where's my
So
huge coat?
it was definitely a shock, but it was also like it felt so good. It just felt like, coming home. And even now, we live in Northern California, and my family, we're hoping to move to Maine in the next few years. And at first glance, Maine is like, we don't really have a whole huge, strong connection to it. But I'm like, but when you think about it, it ticks off all of my ancestral boxes. Like it's near the
Yes.
coast, like in Ireland, and it's got these dramatic cliffs, like in, Scotland or wherever, and Norway. And so it's like, it's all this stuff in my body. When it's there, it like feels like it's home much more
Yeah.
than in California. So my body responds to different locations, even if they're not my ancestral locations. But if the climate and the topography is similar enough, my body's like, yep, this will work.
Oh,
This works.
yeah. It does something to me. It like wakes me up, and yeah, I just feel this sense of coming alive and just being really present. And I think it's nice that you found a place that kind of matches the ancestral location. That's a good goal.
Yeah, it's a
So
goal.
maybe I'll be your neighbor someday.
Yeah. Well, no, we'll just
That
get a
would
big
be
old,
amazing.
we'll get a big old piece of land, and we'll just build some houses on it, and we can all farm it and work
Sold
together. That's the dream, right?
It's an easy sell for me. Yes. Let's see here.
I have children out. I'm sorry, you're gonna have to edit this because there's
no worries.
Yeah, sorry, I'm here. My children. I've sufficiently chastised my children again.
And we're back. Okay, so how has connecting to this way of living, a slower living, knowing your knowing your history with the ancestors, knowing about things like where your roots, originated, and just being intentional. And I think over the past years, as you have really embraced this, how have you noticed that you've maybe changed, or that it affects the way that you, I have a few things here, like cook and eat and prepare meals. And I'm just going to say all these questions because I feel like you're just going to be able to answer all of them. So that, and then like how you like style and arrange your home, what things matter to you to have in the home and keep in the home, and like what do you feel like called to like maybe let go of and create more spaciousness. And then well, let's just start with that.
Yeah. It's funny because I think that, if I have friends of mine who have known me for a really long time, can probably, I'm sorry, one moment, please. I have a small child who is demanding my attention. So I think that I have a few friends, who have known me for a really long time and who have watched my evolution. And I think if somebody from my past were to like look at me now, I'd be like, wow, who's this person? And like, wow, she's like Susie Homemaker over here or something, because, like in my 20s, I was running around San Francisco with my stilettos, and I definitely, did not care about the same things that I care about now. And I think the biggest shift for me happened, when I had kids. The kind of mother I thought I was going to be versus the kind of mother that I became the moment my kids sort of showed up in my life. And I started caring about things that I hadn't necessarily cared about as much. And, I was my whole career was in food and wine. And so like I have definitely been very present on like the San Francisco restaurant scene of the early aughts, and did a lot of wine marketing, and it was very glamorous and lots of technique, and my home kitchen reflected that, and a lot of the cooking I did was very elaborate, and it was very showy, and it was very I want to say like even a little precious, with the fancy ingredients, and everything's very influenced by sort of this Bay Area culinary scene. And now, as time has gone on, I've had to let go of some of that just out of necessity, because I have kids who, I'm sorry, but they're not interested in eating my like scallops with, whatever fancy reduction. They don't want to eat that. And it's kind of wasted on on them. So, things have just sort of naturally evolved into being a little bit more family friendly. But also I cook a lot more simply now. I focus a lot more on, I've always focused on ingredients, but I focus a lot more on fewer techniques and more ways of just like consolidating my work in the kitchen so that,
Simplifying.
yeah, simplifying. It's
You
really,
have chosen to approach a simpler way of living.
it is. Because it's kind of like a necessity piece. My kids
Yes.
are, homeschooling takes a lot of time. And there's a small person here who I have to address again.
Do what you got to do. I feel like I know exactly what you're doing because I'm there with you.
I'm okay. Am I back?
Yep.
I am literally bribing my children with frozen yogurt to get them to be quiet.
No, seriously. Do what you got to do. And then whenever you're ready, I think the last thing you were saying was basically just how you have started to simplify, with the ingredients. And then the next thing you move into might be with arranging and styling your home if you want.
Yeah. So overall, everything is a lot simpler than it used to be. And I'm much more focused on like basic nutrition and making sure everybody's got enough fat and protein and carbs to like keep them energized. So I do a lot of things in batches. I don't really like do meal planning, but if I make a couple loaves of sourdough, I'll know that that's going to feature in the next few days worth of recipes or whatever.
Yeah.
And so definitely try to like make batches of ingredients and then use them throughout the week has kind of been key to simplifying the whole process for myself. That looks a lot different than it used to. And I think as far as like decorating and the way that my house looks, it definitely looks like kids live here. We've got
unavoidable.
Books. Yeah, we've got books in every room. I've got bookshelves for me and bookshelves for them in basically every room of the house. So no matter what room we're in, there's a book somebody can read at some time. So that's like, that's kind of always been there for me. It's just now there's a lot of kids stuff.
Yes, we're the same way, and I have to like keep reminding everyone that they're for books and not clutter.
They really like to use, especially these ones. Like I have the IKEA Kallax bookshelves all over the place because I think they're really useful for having kids and being able to like put stuff in bins and then tuck them away and
I love them.
Yeah.
Something I just thought of when I was listening to you about with the changes and the more simplified version of things like cooking, and I think what I've noticed, and you've reminded me of this, is when I have tried to like shift the way that we're cooking, simplify the way we're cooking, care about what you said, the nutrition. Are we getting the proper fats? More focused on that, less of, I've never been a very fancy chef, but like I started to realize that for me, it was more about, I need to make eating easier. I think that's what you're saying by when you have kids, you wanted to make it simpler and easier. Also for me, just the way that I grew up, I needed to like make eating easier so that I am eating and taking care of myself enough. Because of my history with nutrition and food scarcity and things. And then also what shows up when you become a mother and a parent is those things that we forgot about from childhood. And like I've experienced just unexplained just struggle to sometimes show up in the kitchen or preparing the meals the way I want to, or I feel that I've noticed a lot of what I thought I had to show up as. So there's like this realization of like, what am I expecting from myself? What have I been taught to expect from myself? Okay, is this realistic? Not only is it not realistic for me, but it's like nothing I grew up seeing. So it's like I didn't even grow up with that.
Totally.
Like,
if you don't have
was
a
this
model,
supposed to be? Was this like supposed to be if I lived with my grandmother? These are my goals, because this wasn't the current, reality. And so for me, just getting simpler and being like, oh my God, like sweet potatoes, like vegetables that we can make things with, and just focusing on the meats and the proteins and like the grains and everything has been so it has made things easier. And that is just a simple thing right there that's connected to more of an ancestral way of living as well.
I think there's a disconnect that a lot of millennial, xennial, even like Gen X parents have had to sort of navigate, which is a lot of us grew up with a lot of convenience foods. And our parents were a lot of times, both of them were working. We may have been like latchkey kids. We knew our way around the kitchen in order to make ourselves that boxed mac and cheese and like TV dinners. And I mean, I watched my mom drinking her Slim Fasts and like that kind of eating, which was heavily processed. And so there was kind of a backlash. And now you go on to social media and Pinterest and Instagram and you see these moms with their cute little cookie cutters and they're making these very elaborate bento boxes for their kids. And they're eating like the little hard-boiled eggs cut up into funny shapes and all the little plasticky cutters and trinkets that they put in the kids' lunches. And you're like, oh, so I don't want my kids to grow up on processed food, so I need to do this. And they have to have these elaborate meals. And there's these, kid-friendly recipes. And there's these elaborate, even then, they're elaborate with lots of stuff because you're trying to pack in the hidden spinach and the hidden things to like make your kids eat their veggies. And all of it feels like wrong. Like none of it feels right for me.
And overwhelming.
It's too much. I can't.
How
I
is this
bought those
easier?
cookie cutters. I did. I bought them, and like I was like, okay, my kids aren't wanting to eat this, so we're gonna use these things. And I don't know. I bought the wrong ones or something. They didn't cut right, and I was like, well, that's just
this trick didn't work.
This trick is hacked. Yes, parenting hacks to get your kids to eat their
these
whatever
hacks are worthless.
These hacks are stressful. So for me, I think that I found what made the most sense for me personally. And if it works for some people, I don't want to like, hey, I don't want to knock anybody who's makes these beautiful, elaborate meals for their kids and has the time. If they find pleasure in it and their kids are liking it and it doesn't stress them out, great. You do you. But like, I think a lot of us see that and we feel that pressure and it's like, oh, that's how we're supposed to be now. And we don't want to be that way. And we don't have to be that way. We can absolutely, and this is when I like tap into that sort of ancestral wisdom. And I think, okay, how would my great great grandmother have done things? And I think there's, we can get kind of caught up in sort of that like authenticity thing where it's like, well, our great great grandmothers, they may have used a bunch of lard in cooking, or they may have like made one very basic meal and all the kids were expected to eat it. And if you didn't eat it, you starved. And I'm like, okay, that may have been a necessity when you were like, I don't know, out there, living on your farm by yourself and you didn't have access to a lot of things that we do. But what's the wisdom we can take from that and apply it here? And so for our family, a lot of the times that looks like I will make one dinner for all of us, but there's components and everything's sort of movable. So if I make a pasta dish, I will have the noodles separate from like the veggie sauce. I'll also take some of those veggies. If there's like bell peppers in the sauce, I'll chop up some raw and there will be some raw bell pepper, plain noodles, nice sauce, and then, a salad and some other things and some bread. And that way the pickier, more choosy eaters in our family will always have something that they like to eat, but I'm not making them a separate dinner. And people like, myself and, my adventurous eating daughter will have all the food we want to eat and make sure we're getting like lots of vegetables and protein and all of our nutrition that we need. But it takes a lot of the pressure off of kids who are maybe more choosy, and it takes a lot of pressure off of us as parents to make sure we're eating appropriately and adequately for our own needs and we're not like subsisting off of leftover chicken nuggets. Because we've all been there, I know. Like I have been there and it's not pleasant. It does not make for a happy mom.
We don't like it when we're there.
But we all get there sometimes, And so anytime when I'm in the kitchen now, it's basically like, what can I do now to ensure that won't happen later? So a lot of times if it's the middle of the day and I'm like making their lunch, I'll go, I don't know what's for dinner tonight, but I'm just going to put in some rice in the Instant Pot right now. God, I feel like I'm talking about Instant Pot all the time. I should be getting
You're not
stock in their company or something. But like I'll put the rice in and I'll be like, okay, well at least that'll be done for dinner waiting for us. So that's one thing that's kind of taken off my plate. So it's just making choices throughout the day that will help support us or help support me later on.
Yeah, and when you have that contract with Instapot, it's just like you can just mention that this is just a great way to make it simpler. And when that's your intention, you'll start to find ways that are going to make it simpler. So you reminded me of something, though. What was it? Let me take a drink and get refocused.
Yeah.
Now that the kids are being good, I'm like lost my track of
Yeah,
thoughts.
it happens. I'm all still flustered from them. But that's kind of normal, whether I'm recording a podcast with you or not. It's like the middle of the day where I'm like, where are my headphones? Stop talking to me.
I know.
Let me take a deep breath.
How do you feel like this approach and these intentions have also affected the way that you are out in the community, how you're showing up with you and your family when you maybe go to events, what kind of things and activities you're wanting to go to, and what kind of priorities you have when you're also homeschooling and spending time in the home and also being a busy creator for your business. Like, how does this show up for you just everywhere?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think one of the things that the only way that this has ever, like, life has worked for us is if we're very intentional about what we do outside the home. I'm a highly sensitive person, so I definitely have the overwhelm that comes with being out and about a lot of the times. And so homeschooling is great for us, for me personally, because we get to like be home and be regulated. But we also have a ton of activities that we do outside the home, and we have a lot of things that we do with our homeschool friends. For a long time, we did, the kids would have gymnastics with their homeschool friends. We went on a hike with them. They went to outdoor school together. And they still do a variety of those different activities. But we're really intentional about making sure that we have whole days where we don't have anything planned, because I know I need that to recover. My son needs that too. We suspect he's highly sensitive as well. So like he really responds after a busy day out. He needs the next day to recuperate. And I think knowing your family's needs are just like the only way to make it all work. And I think in the homeschooling world, especially, a lot of people think that homeschool kids just sit around at home all day and are totally not socialized. And I think the opposite is actually true. Homeschool kids have so much stuff that they're able to do and so many different types of activities and groups of people they can hang out with that we have to be intentional about not doing too much.
Yes.
And actually remember that we can spend time in the home and be at home, because there's such a wealth of activities and opportunities out there for us. So I think being intentional, being okay with saying no to things, and understanding we have a limited bandwidth, and that part of learning at home is also resting and not being actively in a worksheet all day long, and making sure that the kids have downtime to do whatever they want to do because they need it. They're human animals who need their rest time, and their brains work great when they've had enough rest. And so I think, we don't really see homeschooling as anything different from living our everyday life, because our lives are sort of built around these cycles of rest, learning, activity, rest, learning, activity. And it's sometimes that happens a couple times in one day. Sometimes one of those periods will take the whole day, and then it needs, a corresponding rest period afterwards, or a corresponding activity day. But I think it's just trying to be really intentional. Which isn't always the easiest when there's so much to do.
It's a practice.
Yeah.
But I think what you are really demonstrating is that, it is intentional, it is a practice, and these are all of the ways and the areas that it shows up. And I think it's funny listening to you. I'm thinking like, yeah, when you set these intentions, maybe they start off with being like, oh, I want to live more slow. I want to live slowly or slower.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with being highly sensitive. I know I need more rest, so we start there. But then what we like find ourselves in is like how maybe we're suddenly decolonizing homeschool
Mm-hmm.
because we're homeschooling, but in a way that feels right for us. And like you said, we're not always in a worksheet. Like
We're not doing school at home.
homeschooling is just part of our
Yeah.
lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, we
Yeah.
have cycles where we do our education work.
Yeah.
And just like we have cycles where we eat together our meals and prepare the meals.
Yeah.
So it shows up everywhere. And I think what happens too, and I've noticed, is we start to kind of see also all of the areas where we are so entangled in patriarchal ways, in Western ways, and this like, what is the word? I'm like the rat race mentality, but that's not
The
what I want to say.
productivity above all
Productivity,
else.
hyper
Yeah.
productivity, and
Yeah.
like it just shows up in all the areas. So I think the
Mm-hmm.
more that we tune into wanting to be more seasonal,
Yeah.
wanting to
Yeah.
embrace our animal nature, and wanting that extra support and also maybe like validation,
Mm-hmm.
knowledge
Mm-hmm.
that comes from connecting with our ancestors, the more we'll realize like that we can intend, and this shows up in all areas of our home. And
Yeah.
I think that's great though, because I think it
Like,
would be fun to be a person who knew you before that and who knows you now, and to be like, look at the evolution, because it's
yeah,
just, you
that's,
just evolve, and you pay more attention to what you need and what
yeah.
feels natural.
I think a lot, I think that a long time ago, my understandings of capitalism for a long time wasn't like a dirty word,
Yeah.
we were raised, especially like, kids of the 80s and 90s, capitalism was not a bad thing. Communism, that's a bad thing. Socialism, that's a bad thing. And, one of the things capitalism depends on is it depends on us training children to be productive as much as possible. And so that's how the modern school system is built. Um, it's training little workers. And so by stepping out of that paradigm, by educating our kids at home in a more seasonal way, in a more like aligned way, in the way that they want to learn, in the way that they learn best, really, it's like inherently anti-capitalist. It's
Yeah.
inherently saying productivity and growth above all else is not what we're here for. I mean, growth, sure, if we're talking about like learning and emotional growth or something like that, or,
But
the
we're
way
not
that
prioritizing
but
that above all
we're
else.
not prioritizing that above all else. Sometimes it's okay to be in a fallow period and to not be growing. And it's okay for our kids to have a week where they're just like vegging out with some books and some paint, and they're not like learning anything academic, but they're just chilling. They're out in nature going on a hike. Like
Yeah.
they're learning about their nervous systems. They're learning about nature. And so much learning happens outside of the classroom.
Yes.
So I really think that, homeschooling, um, and like refusing to put my kids into that feeder system is like, I don't know, revolutionary in some ways. And so maybe the people who knew me back then wouldn't think it's that much of a stretch, because I've always kind of been a shit starter. I was just a shit starter in different ways. It was more about like the rah feminism, and I'm going to break the glass ceiling with my cute stilettos. And now it's
Hmm.
more like, I'm going to head down to the trail with my kids and my Birkenstocks, and we're going to
Yes.
break capitalism by
A different
opting
kind
out.
of revolution. And
Yes,
it starts at
exactly.
home. Yes, because that's what the children are learning, and your children, um it's like learning to value rest, learning
Yeah.
to not feel like it's bad, or you know to have breaks, and to not be always doing a math
And
worksheet.
I think it's like something that our ancestors knew. Like I think that they knew that they needed rest. They could see they needed rest. There was rest built into the
Oh
seasons.
yeah.
And like that's to me, that's what I mean. That's the definition of revolution is to go. Literally to revolve, to go back around. So you're going back to a way of living that was more
Yeah.
aligned. You are revolving backwards in some ways, uh, to a time when people kind of inherently understood, no, you can't work after dark. Like, it's nighttime. You light a candle, read a book, be with your family. You don't sit on your phone answering Slack messages and,
Hmm.
you know, you're not always working. You have to have downtime.
Yeah, the things that I would love to have back um, would be, and I mean, these are the things that I want to practice now, and that I would say I do practice now, but like I want to be able to really live this way,
Hmm.
where when the sun goes down, like our body is seeing the sun go down. So
Hmm.
we're like getting that message from nature to
Hmm.
start to shift into the night.
Hmm.
And when the sun is coming up or when we're starting our day before that, whatever, it's like I want my body to wake up and to reconnect with like those natural rhythms. I'll watch a movie or a show, and I mean, it could be a book, it doesn't matter, but if it is taking place in a place where I'm from ancestrally or have connections to, I feel just, yeah, I get excited and almost a longing to like be sitting by the fire and be cozy with everybody. And as you said, to not just be glued to the TV. Something that I like to do sometimes is just notice, like, if I've turned my TV off or it's off or whatever, and I'm in that quiet place. Sometimes I like to look around. Maybe I'm out walking my dog too. But noticing how many of us, and it's not even a judgment, like it's literally an observation of like how it doesn't matter if the sun is up or down or whatever. We're probably like in our living rooms and the TV is on. And I'm always amazed who has their blinds open and it's like you can just see right into their house because I'm like, shut this stuff. But it's like everybody has their TV on, whether they're cooking or eating in front of the TV. It's like this is just an example of where we are right now and how disconnected we are. And like I want to live again where the things that matter to us were like after being outside during the day working, if that's what we were, we're like coming back to the people we live with and care about and having that meal,
Hmm.
by the fire together, like in that big
Hmm.
meal hall room or whatever,
Hmm.
like, or just with our family in our little hut, like whatever it is. I long for that.
I know it's I think that's another way that we've prioritized, you know, the activities we do outside of the home, because, a lot of kids today, they go to school all day long, they get out of school, they have a sports activity, they get home, it's like 6:37, 8 o'clock, and then when are you supposed to eat dinner? When are they supposed to rest before they have to go to sleep and do it all
In the
again the next
car,
day? Right?
on the car ride.
That's just, I can't live like that, and I can't
I
ask my
know.
kids to live like that, and I think that, again, it's fine if people are intentional about it, but, I mean, I see kids who are in activities 5 days a week, 6 days a week, and it's like, when do they get to just be kids? When do they get to sit around the table and eat with their family? When did they get to just sit around in the living room while, like, I don't know, they all do their own hobbies, but together they do a puzzle, they do
Yeah.
some knitting, like, there's no family, just, you can do your own thing, but just do your own thing together. And like, a lot of spontaneous conversation happens in those times,
Yeah.
and we just don't have room for it. You're supposed to have a conversation with your kid now in the car, in between activities. You're supposed to eat in the car, you're supposed to do your homework in the car. Like,
Yeah.
when is just that time? Oh, it's on the weekend. You can go on a hike with your family on the weekend,
When
with all the
everyone
other
else is
families,
trying
right?
to.
Yeah, and it's just like, all right, guys, let's get out to the trail, and then we
Yeah.
got to fit this in between soccer practice and baseball practice, and it's uh it's
I
just
think
not, we're not meant to live that way, I don't think.
exactly. And I think what we're noticing, what you and I have noticed, is just especially becoming a mother, it just makes all of this, it takes it to a different level in a way, because what I started to notice is how am I feeling? How is this affecting my anxiety or how I'm
Mhm.
showing up?
Mhm.
And then I remember having this moment recently that I think I even shared with you where I'm like, where am I even doing things differently? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I want these things, I value these things, but like, am I teaching the kids that?
Mm-hmm.
Am I,
Mm-hmm.
are we doing that in our home? And so
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, it just happens in waves where I'm like, okay, we're going to take this a little deeper. We're going to move into this a little more. And because I value them knowing that and them having the time to rest and
Mm-hmm.
creating space for those conversations. And I don't I am not someone who wants to constantly be in the car driving around doing all of these things, feeling like I'm in the rat race. So that's why we're having this conversation,
Right.
Christina. That's why we're choosing
Yeah.
to live this way, because we have lived that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't care if other people keep living that way.
Yeah.
I don't want to do it.
Right.
And I also
Well,
want it to be a little easier for me to not do it.
we want to show our kids that there's another way of living. And like
Yes.
they are going to get lots and lots of exposure to people living in sort of like the capitalist paradigm where they're like, they're doing all the activities, their friends are doing it. They know that exists. They know that's an option. Where do they see the alternative to that lifestyle? You know, and I think if we value rest, and like this is something that I see on social media a lot, people are talking about self-care and they're talking about the bubble baths and they're talking about the you got to take care of yourself, you got to make time for rest. If that truly is a value for you, resting, you have to allow time for it, which means, to go back to this we were talking about, you have to say no to some things. And I've talked about this, my favorite Elizabeth Gilbert quote before, but she talks, it's not even her quote. She learned it from, she was talking, this is like from a Facebook post she made, like, I don't know, 8 years ago or something. She was talking to some old lady who, when she was talking about how she knows she has to learn how to say no to things that she doesn't want to do. And she's so hard at saying no to things. And the old lady was like, no, you don't have to learn how to say no to the things you don't want to do. You have to learn how to say no to the things you do want to do, because there isn't enough time for us to do all the things we want to do. So we really need to get clear and prioritize, what is it that we want? If we value rest, if we value seasonal living, which like by definition almost means slower living, simpler living, we have to learn how to say no to things. We have to learn how to say no to activities that we may really want to do, that our family may really want to do, but we know that it's not going to work out for them because maybe they're highly sensitive and it's too many activities in one day and they're not going to be able to handle it. We have to learn how to say no to some of those cool gadgets on Amazon because they're not great for the environment. They're not great for our wallets. They're not great for the clutter in our home. We may really want it. We have to say no to it. And so saying no to some of the things we want is going to help us live more in line with our values. If our values are living ancestrally, living seasonally, living slower, and resting more.
There's a huge leaf blower outside, so I was just like, will he go away in time? But that's okay. That's a good
Life in
natural
the
pause.
suburbs.
I know. I'm just like, let's talk about all the anger I have about. No, I'm just kidding. Currently, this non-important waste of a time thing is happening outside my window. Okay.
Well, I can't hear it from my
Good.
end. That really.
Hold on, I think he's walking back over
It's okay.
here.
I just muted so I could shout at my kids to turn the dang iPad down again.
Okay.
They don't get it very often. They haven't gotten it in like a month. Like I try to use it so sparingly with them.
I know.
And
So it's a treat, and they don't.
I tried to get this horrible. I think you have the same one. This Amazon Fire Kindle Kids tablet garbage.
Mm.
And it doesn't work. It's like from 5 years ago, and it does not do anything.
Yeah, ours are
and
trash
I'm like,
too.
I'm just gonna throw it away. And I'm just like, this is the stupidest piece of junk I've ever purchased.
I know. And I told Michael, I was like, do not buy more of this shit.
Mm-mm.
Don't surprise me.
I'll buy a used iPad before I buy anything else that's like marketed for kids. But even then.
So continuing on with what you mentioned and are saying about saying no even to things that we might want, whether it's a gadget or whatever. I just think that's a great moment to also say how important it is to I think learning that this kind of lifestyle exists, like maybe for anyone who's like, I've never heard of that, or I've seen it on Instagram, but I don't know what it means. Just knowing that this exists is like a great way to start the invitation for yourself to be like, I've never thought about how I'm actually living. I've
Mm-hmm.
just kind of been
Mm-hmm.
doing life, because I know that's kind of how where I was before I started to be like,
Mm-hmm.
seasonal living. That's what the fuck is that? It's calling me in.
And
What is that?
And if you go on YouTube or Instagram or TikTok and you put in slow living or simple living, like 9 times out of 10, you're gonna get a white lady. You're gonna get like a Christian white lady who is a stay-at-home mom, and she's gonna be wearing a dress and
Possibly an anti-vaxxer.
possibly an anti-vaxxer, possibly very Christian, possibly, I mean, possibly all of those things. Now, don't get me wrong. I am a white lady. I do wear dresses. You know, and I think a lot of people in that community sometimes think I'm one of them. And so they'll leave these like quotes, or they'll like leave comments on my YouTube or something. And and then they'll read my profile and it'll say like, you know, I'm anti-patriarchy, and I'm here for social justice. And they're like, ugh, social justice. Ooh, like it's a dirty word. And I'm like, oh yeah, you're in the wrong place. But that's most of this world, like this slow living world. And people have this idea again that it means like Amish, Christian, you've got to like stay at home, make everything from scratch, and
maybe you
sacrifice
never
yourself.
watch TV.
Yeah. Never watch TV. Never. And even though these people are posting on Instagram, it's like you have no technology in your home somehow. And like, it's
thing
just
that just cracks me up is like, I mean, I don't invest much time in Instagram, but like these people who are living really slowly sure have a lot of freaking time to be on that.
They do. I'm like, how do you have enough time? Like some of these, like how do you have enough time to churn your own butter?
Is this a slow living person on the other side of this? I mean, how many nannies
or a slow living machine? Like, right? And I'm like, how many people are in the background though? Like, there's an account on Instagram. Her I don't know if you know of her. Her name's Ballerina Farm, and she and her husband have like a meat company, and they live in Utah, of course, and they got 7 kids, and she's a former ballerina, and she has like, I don't know, like 8 million followers or something. I mean, this chick is like not famous really for anything other than being this homemaker, right? But she's Mormon, and she's at home with her 7 kids, and she shows, milking her cow and then making her own butter. But what she doesn't show, and she said like, oh, we've never had a nanny. But like in the background in some of her pictures, you can see people who are like not her children, who are like hanging out with her kids. Like she's all her
brothers and sisters and her mama
they've all
and
got
dad.
their own kids. There's like a million of them, and it's like they employ nannies behind the scene. They employ social media help. They have people who help run their accounts for them, who help respond to things, and there's all this unseen labor
and work
that goes on with some of these very successful slow living creators. And even if they don't, it's not real. It's pretend. We all know that if the camera pans over here, they're going to see a big mess. They're going to see a box of chicken nuggets. They're going to see an iPad. They're going to see something that doesn't fit with the slow living mold. And it's disingenuous. And so I really want people to know that like, it is okay to live a slower lifestyle, and to like to wear dresses sometimes, and to like to bake your own bread, but also like, I don't know, be not Christian, be not heterosexual,
hashtag secular families.
Yeah,
it's hashtag okay. Queer families.
Yeah, you can be all of these things. The lifestyle of like slowing down is not this exclusionary white cis het thing that a lot of people think it is, because there's so many content creators out there in this
word
space.
Yeah, I don't think it's is it co-opted? Is that right?
Yeah, for like they've co-opted the term homemaking. That's why I use homekeeper in my title, because homemaking is so associated with like that being 1950s, Mormon. Yeah, Christian, Mormon, 1950s.
I'm sorry, I got a little triggered by the last few minutes.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's good. I'm trying to just move it through.
But that's why there needs to be more people who are okay with, I think, sharing what they are doing to slow down in their own lives. You don't
Yes.
have to do all of the things. You don't have to
Yeah.
bake sourdough bread in order to like enjoy living simpler and cooking more simple meals. You don't have to do it 100% of the time.
Yeah.
You can have a really great day where you're really slow and mindful, and then the next few days are a little more chaotic than you maybe would like. It's a process. There's no destination. It's just we make so many choices every day. Let's start looking at making choices that help make us a little bit more mindful of the time and space that we're living in. I don't know. That's my 2 cents.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's like, okay, so realize that there is a different way of living, which is what we're talking about. And then further realize that this is not only for a certain type of people. And I agree with you 100%. And that's like just how I want to do everything. I mean, I think that we just don't even think about it. Like, I feel like to do this work and to actually have it be relevant, it's like you need to know about the Starbucks cup over here on the side of the desk. You need to know about like the pile of laundry over here that's like waiting.
Mm-hmm.
Because for me, if I was looking at like the things that I value and flipping that on myself, I value people who are authentic and like realistic,
Mm-hmm.
because this is the reality. So the conversation isn't like, how can you look like everything's perfect
Mm-hmm.
and slow? No, it's like we live in a shitty, chaotic world. How the fuck can I have a day where I feel like I actually had restorative rest,
Mm-hmm.
good, healthy meals, so that the next 3 days when I'm driving the kids around
Mm-hmm.
or working or whatever I'm doing and I'm feeling like just another cog in the machine that I don't want to be in,
Mm-hmm.
that's the reality, is like making days where you are really practicing this. And then when it is those days where it feels like a shitstorm, just knowing that like that might be how today feels, but this is my intention. This is the way that I'm living. So at least that I know I'm headed in the direction where I'm going to hopefully be feeling more calm in this chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not possible to feel that all the time. And it's
Mm-hmm.
really hard to feel it at all.
Yeah.
Like what you said, intention matters so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's definitely times when like I feel like my day is getting away from me and I feel like the chaos creeps in and I do my best to keep it at bay. But, not every day is going to go perfect. There's going to be days that feel chaotic and hectic. But I think, yeah, intention does count for a lot. And it's something I forget to do sometimes. But whenever I remember, it's so helpful in the middle of the day to come back to that intention and to sit. And there's times when I'll say it out loud to the kids and I'm like, this is all too much for me right now. We need to have a reset. Let's all sit down and let's all give each other a big hug and let's just sit and talk about how we want the rest of the day to go. And then,
I
talking to
love that.
them like they're real whole human people and, you know, they're both sniping at each other. And I'm like, all right, let's talk about what's going on. What do we want right now? And like, how can we get there? And what can we prioritize? And like, they're capable of understanding so much more. Kids know so much. I mean, that we just don't give them credit for. And they need guidance and they need help understanding. But a lot of the times when we see like behavior stuff from them, it's because they're overstimulated. It's because they're
Yes.
not feeling heard. It's because they're not getting what they want, which a lot of times they just want to regulate themselves. They just don't know how to do it. And they don't know that that's what they're feeling. So
Yeah.
a lot of times they just, if they need to be separated, it's like, okay, you can go to this room, you can go to this room. Everybody, let's just take a deep breath. Everybody calm down. And then we're going to come back together and we're going to move slower. And that might mean that we don't do something that we had planned.
Yep.
And that might be disappointing. And
Saying
we
no
can,
to something you wanted to
right.
do.
But we're teaching them that, you know what? Everybody's having a crazy time. We all wanted to do this thing. You wanted to do this. You wanted to do this. You both want to go to the library. We can't do all those things. So how can we be okay with a choice? How can we make a choice together? And it's modeling to them that we're allowed to feel our feelings. You can be upset about something. You can be disappointed that you don't get to do what you want to do. And we're still going to do the right thing for our family, which is for us to pick one activity we're going to do and save the other ones. We'll do that one on Thursday and that one on Friday. But we're giving them the tools now, imperfectly, because there's definitely times when, like, I am not perfect at it, and I lose my temper, or I'm like, we're not going to do anything then. But the more
Yep.
times that we can work through it together as a family, the more we learn together as a family and realize that, what's good for the whole family is going to be what's best for us all individually in that particular day or,
Yeah.
season.
And then they are practicing with us,
Mhm.
noticing, like,
Mhm.
okay, mom said that she is feeling overwhelmed, because I do this with my kids too. So they see the, like, the getting
Mhm.
frazzled.
Mhm.
And then they hear and they're like, oh, but okay, what is mom saying? Okay, okay. And then they get to experience the, like,
Yep, they see the deep breaths, they see the separation or the removal of stimulation, and then they
yeah.
see the recentering and they can
Mm-hmm.
watch it happen. And for those of us who grew up without that modeled, it is incredibly hard because, like in my family, it was just yelling or complete neglect and ignoring. And so I don't have a model. There's nobody who showed me how to be a mother. There's nobody who showed me how to live intentionally or live slower or apologize or like any of those
Yeah.
things. I've had to teach myself as I'm teaching my kids. And it's the hardest fucking work I've ever done. And it's so worth it because they are learning how to slow down. They are learning how to apologize. They are learning how to name their emotions and practical things they can do to help those emotions, you know, get moved in and out or get
Yes.
integrated. And
To not be ignored, to be felt, to be
yep. And they
allowed.
don't know it, but that's anti-capitalism right there
Yep.
because capitalism depends on people, stuffing their emotions down, not
Yeah.
feeling the disappointment because they want to go, 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 get, achieve, achieve, achieve.
Yeah.
And, sometimes that's not what we need. We need to actually feel our feelings and feel our disappointment and our fear or our sadness in order to be whole.
Yes. And I'm glad you mentioned that. I think that I wanted to talk to you a little bit about on being a mother that's tuned into these
Hmm.
cycles and seasons, and what it's like to connect with, you know, ancestral wisdom, and especially when you didn't grow up a certain way, and if you are not in contact with current family members right now. Um, is it possible to not be connected to living family and be connected to our ancestors? Yeah. And knowing that that is possible, it's just like that's another thing where we get to start questioning how we want to start to move forward. And I
Hmm.
know you just shared a really lovely email on Substack about this that I'll have to share the link to here. But is there anything from that that you feel maybe bringing up now would be like
Yeah,
timely?
sure. I mean, I think for a long time, I didn't really care as much about the details of my ancestry. I didn't like go on ancestry.com and do any of that real research until my kids were born. I was always kind of interested in it, but it was after, my son was born that I really started to think about my ancestors, think about who they were, the lives that they led, the challenges they may have faced. Um, and more importantly, that I began to connect with them on like a spiritual level. And this is like having kids really started me out into like my woo woo era, or at least I've always been very woo woo, but my period of being openly woo woo and saying things that were like, definitely on the eyebrow raising side of spiritual. But like I have a relationship with my ancestors and I feel their presence a lot and I feel their presence when I'm cooking sometimes. I almost always light a candle in the kitchen when I'm cooking. it's just a way of sort of setting my intention and sort of connecting um, with them, and I feel their presence there in that little flame, and I picture them around me um, when I'm having a hard time or when I'm going to bed or in the still hours. And it's almost always grandmothers. I think in this era of the patriarchy, most of my like male ancestors understand that they can take a step back and that I really need like the female energy. So it's mostly my great grandmothers and whatnot who are like surrounding me. Um, and I talk about ancestors with the kids. They understand like who they are in theory. They're shouting in the background. Sorry if they're making noise. But they they understand that I have this relationship, and I don't ever force anything on them. I don't ever like force them to pray, the way that we have Maven, you grew up
Yeah.
Mormon, I grew up Catholic, and it was very much like, now you kneel, now you pray, now it's not like
Yeah.
that in my house. They see it. And if they see me pulling cards, like sometimes they'll ask if they can pull a card, or if they ask what I'm doing with my candle lit and my eyes closed, I'll tell them and they might want to join me, but it's never something I force on them.
You are
Um,
teaching by experience and how you live your life, which
yeah,
is one of the best ways to teach
I
and to
think
guide.
it's definitely the most like, I'm not going to force anybody to do anything.
Yeah.
They'll have to come up with their own spiritual practices, and maybe they'll take some of mine, maybe they'll take all of mine, maybe they'll take
Yeah,
none
I
of
think that
mine.
you're
It'll
just
be their own
inspiring
journey.
the future.
Yeah.
Yeah. They'll be
Um,
inspired by you.
for a long time, I felt a sort of imposter syndrome because I do not have contact with my mother and most of my maternal family. Um, I love them all very much, but I went no contact with my mom about 3 years ago. And there was definitely a period where I had a little bit of like, how can I feel this like nebulous, maybe imaginary connection with my ancestors when I'm ignoring my living mother who's
Yeah.
lives 3 hours away from me. Um, but ultimately, I made a decision because she is unable to be a mother. She was unable to be a grandmother, and she didn't know how to do those things. And having her in my life in any way, and I tried so many different ways to keep her in my life, but having her pop up at random times with random, narcissistic needs was really damaging to my mental health. And she would pop up and send me a Facebook message or something about, with a guilt trip about why I hadn't seen her. And I would internalize that, and it would make me a not as patient, not as kind mother. It would make me on edge. It was highly triggering. And I think I asked for so little. I mean, and in return for maintaining a relationship, and ultimately it was stuff that she was unable to give. So there was a period of time after I cut off contact where I really felt like I was some kind of an imposter to like talk about mothering so much and to talk about my ancestors. But I think leaning into my motherhood and leaning into my ancestral connection has been the biggest healing of that like original mother wound. In learning to mother my children the way I was never mothered, I'm doing so much healing work for my own inner little girl who didn't get that relationship with her mother, didn't get that like, I got a lot of I got a lot of neglect. I got a lot of, you know, not interested, and just like,
Yeah.
yeah, it was a lot of like emotional abuse really. And um
Emotional abuse and neglect and
yeah, abandonment. I mean, she abandoned
abandonment.
me at several different points in my life, like physical abandonment,
Yeah.
like leaving me with strangers. And so there I can't imagine, I couldn't imagine doing that to my kids. And so it was really having the connection with my ancestors where I could feel their loving, grandmotherly, maternal presence around me that held me in a lot of ways, and made me feel like just because that link with my mother, she was dealing with so many traumas and so many wounds of her own that never got addressed. I mean, horrific trauma. And they hold her too, and they're holding my grandmother, who also victim of trauma, grew up in Nazi Germany and there's so much abandonment. There's just the trail of
Yeah.
destruction. And so my ancestors, I know, hold me. They are helping me to break those generational curses. And they are allowing me to mother my children the way they deserve to be mothered and the way I deserved to be mothered, the way my mother deserved to be mothered. And that might mean that in this life, there is no healing for me and my mother. But I think that in the great span of things, whenever we pass on into the ancestral realm, there can be healing then. And in
Yes.
the meantime, I will have provided a more solid foundation for my children. So it's like, it's really hard emotional work, but it is so powerful and necessary. And I would make that choice 100 times a day if I had to, over and over
Absolutely.
again.
Which I think circles back to this topic about generational healing and breaking generational curses. It is very hard. And becoming a mother when you have any kind of this pain with your own mother, to go through, I mean, I just can't explain how it changes you, but I feel like it's like, in a way, you are doing this work. You're aware of how hard it is. You're aware that this isn't how you want it to be. You're aware of what you deserved and didn't get. And it's painful. It's like immensely painful, to be an orphan and to be abandoned. And while those parents are alive, but it's like, it goes back to you knowing what you intend for yourself and your family and what you value and prioritize. And I think that's why, even though this is such hard work with the mother wound or any kind of family trauma, but really, like, you are being a buffer. So the kids are going to actually have, and the generations after you will have had this buffer of you, literally, like, you are the buffer, of where they get to start again.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's
like really breaking that curse.
It's like a boulder rolling down the hill, and it's crushed every woman in its path up until it hits my back. And it's like, I may be on my knees with that boulder on my back, but like, it's not going to roll over my kids.
Fuck
It's
yeah.
not going to crush my daughter. That's not going to be her legacy. And I don't care.
That's such a good analogy. You're making me cry.
I mean,
Oh shit.
It's not going to crush me, and it hasn't crushed me, but it's hard work keeping it back sometimes. But there's other times there's things that help,
Yeah.
There's little birds that come out of the forest and help push it back, like in Snow White or something. There's knowing, like that boulder, the power of that boulder is lessened the more we talk about it being there. It, like, little bits of it chip off, and fall to the wayside until it's just a big rock back there. And it's always going to be there, but it doesn't have to crush us.
Yeah. And again, 100%. Great fucking analogy. And for me, it's like the motivation just never dies. So, like, no matter how hard that boulder or how heavy it feels sometimes, just allowing that and allowing the awareness of how much it sucks. But then, like, for me, reminding myself exactly what you said, that my children, they're safe. This isn't gonna
There's going to
run
be other
them
things
over.
that they'll have to, deal with. There's going to be other rocks that roll down the hill that they're going to have to bat away. But this one, like this particular one,
But this huge generational curse that's been going down from mother to mother to mother, because that's how I feel working up my familial line. It's like the mother wound that, where did it originate, and
we can't go back far enough. I mean, I've traced mine back on both sides of my mother's side of the family and my father's side of the family. The amount of neglect and abandonment, specifically, like my mother's father abandoned her. Like her grandfather abandoned her grandmother. Like it was there. It goes back so far that I don't even have stories. Like eventually they're just names in a register. And after that, even ancestry doesn't go back that far for me, but I know they're there.
But to
And
make that real, it's like all of that stuff that you mentioned, and then it's like, and then here we are with Christina, and your children are not experiencing this
mhm,
abandonment, neglect, manipulation, whatever it was.
all of it.
All
Yeah.
of it. All of it. And like,
Alcoholism,
as you said,
narcissism. It's just,
as you said, they'll have other things, but like
yeah.
these things that have been poisoning the lines,
Mhm.
poisoning the lineage,
Mhm.
for me, that's definitely like my recentering, is
Yep.
remembering how much I feel like is at stake and how worth it is. So, circling back a little bit, after we have just, covered some stuff that's a little bit heavy and some deep work, there is a lot of deep work here. I just wanted to revisit one thing that you mentioned earlier before we end things. And you talked about homemaking and that
Mhm.
you are reclaiming like homekeeping, or that you've
Mhm.
been using homekeeping. I feel like
Yeah.
you've already reclaimed it, but I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm reclaiming
It's mine.
homekeeping
I'm
too.
taking it.
But like, let's talk about reclaiming homekeeping, because I feel like there's a lot of aspects about this that conversation we've had today where if we were talking about homemaking, a lot of this stuff wouldn't even be there. Like, we would
Yeah.
not be talking about
No.
anything magical
No.
like
No.
this.
No.
So with
It's
reclaiming homekeeping,
yeah.
it's like, because this is for, like what you've told me before, like this is for queer families, this is for secular families, this is for, it's not just white Christian women like we talked about.
It's not even for it doesn't even have to be for families. It can be for like, a single person, living in an apartment in a city somewhere.
Mind blown even more. You're right. It's for everybody. Hello.
It really is, because so first, like homemaking, like we said, homemaking is so got these images of 1950s, cis het white women. I don't think that I can reclaim that by myself. I don't, so homekeeping also for me, it felt like making to me implied like, okay, you make something and you're done making it. It's made. Keeping is more like that is a constant act. I am keeping track of, I am keeping this thing here close to me. And so as anybody who lives in a home knows, it's hard to keep track of everything. It's hard to maintain a clean home. It's hard to keep it the way that you want to keep it. It's an
I mean, I'd
ongoing
say if you have
process.
children, it's impossible.
I think it is impossible if you have children, unless you have a nanny and a housekeeper and a chef and like you're
Paid help.
wealthy. Like unless
Paid
you
help.
have like generational wealth, it's really hard to keep
Yeah.
it clean. Anything. But I think that for me, like reclaiming it has been the home. The home should be like a sanctuary. The home should be a place where you walk in, your family walks in, and you feel an immediate lifting from the weight of the world outside. The home is where I do all of whatever your spiritual tradition, almost all like major spiritual traditions didn't originate in big churches. They were in people's homes. Like, it doesn't really matter which spiritual tradition you follow. There may have been larger festivals or community celebrations, but like if you are communing with God or the beyond or the universe, you're doing it from your home. You're doing it from a smaller place. And that place feels safe to you. And so I think when we talk about homekeeping, we're talking about keeping a sanctuary for ourselves. We are talking about keeping a place of welcome, a place of beauty, a place of joy, a place of comfort, an actual roof over our heads that keeps us dry and warm and safe. It's a place of safety. And so, with everything that I bring into my home or everything that I do in my home, cook in my home, I have to ask myself, does it feed those missions? Does it feed safety? Does it feed comfort? What does it do? What is it doing here? Does it help me keep my home the way that it wants to be kept, the way I want to keep it? Does it help my family feel welcome and free and safe? And I will say that I think I'm doing a good job of it because everybody seems to love being here. And the only times I don't love being here are when people don't clean up their own toys.
Yeah.
um, because that is still a struggle. And it feels like no matter how many times we like purge toys, another holiday comes up and more toys come in.
I know. I hate
And,
it.
I wish we could be the family that had like 5 wooden Waldorf open-ended toys.
Yeah,
Um, but, we're just, the modern era has its grip in us a little bit too
I
much.
know.
We're not as bad as a lot of families. We're not as, perfect as some Instagram families out there. But I'm secretly convinced that all those Instagram families that have all the wooden toys on display and like the neutral colored clothes, I'm pretty convinced they all have plastic Tupperwares in their garage full of Legos
All
and,
the other toys.
plastic Disney toys. I'm
All the
convinced.
plastic toys.
Yes. You can still have a slow, mindful, intentional home and have some crappy toys that you don't agree with in your house.
Absolutely. Just like we said
Nobody's
earlier, it's like we aren't aiming for perfect, folks.
Nope.
We're
No,
trying to find a little bit of respite
but
in this
again, going
world.
back to like homekeeping, I'm considering every member of my family feeling welcome and happy. And if I told my kids, no, you can't have anything that doesn't match my aesthetic, that wouldn't be me keeping a very welcoming home, So
Yeah,
that's how I roll.
that is true. Gosh, it's so funny. I love that you mentioned that this is also for single people.
Mhm.
It's just another way that we can be rebellious as well and to be
Mhm.
like, it doesn't have to be this way. It's not
Mm-mm.
just for a man and a woman, it's not just for a family.
Mm-mm.
It's for everybody. And
Mhm.
that, I love that. And some of the things that I love about all of this is just feeling a little bit like rebellious when it's like, no, there's a better way.
Mhm.
Don't tell me I can't do it.
Whatever way works for you, as long as you're not harming, and then this is like my philosophy on life, as long as you're not harming anyone else or denying anybody else's, you know, um, being, then you do you. If
Yep.
if having like hot pink couch cushions makes you happy, like go for it. If
Hmm.
having, like if I don't, it doesn't make me happy, I would not do that. I prefer my neutrals. But like, it's about thinking, really allowing yourself to dream up what it means to be home, what you want from home, not what you want it to look like in terms of like, I want it to look like this, TikTok influencers, beautiful, whatever. It's like, what can you do with the home that you have right now to make it feel like restorative for you? How can your home serve you in your goals of like living more mindfully, living more seasonally, living slower, allowing yourself more rest? Like if your couch is old and outdated and uncomfortable, can you find a better one on Facebook Marketplace? Can you order one from IKEA that you like more? Like, can you find a way to promote rest in your home, um, in a way that like is aligned with your goals, with your values?
So I love what you're talking about, noticing if there's anything that maybe we could take out of our home or replace it, bring something new in that might bring us joy or feel more in alignment when we do become aware of what we value and what we're intending. So once we know what we want in our home and we're starting to explore how we can kind of embrace this lifestyle, one of the things we can do is connect with Christina on her YouTube channel
Mm,
and watch your relaxing, lovely videos. And
thank
it's
you.
just fun. And we get to see all the beautiful things that you have highlighted. And then,
And you get to see
like,
my under construction kitchen that's not
and
beautiful
how you're
right now.
still like, how are you still pulling off all this gorgeous work? Like, I don't even know. Superwoman, Wonder Woman. The other thing that we mentioned before, I'm going to have the links for your Substack. The last 2 letters were so right aligned with this, and it's actually why I was inspired to have you on. And then something that I'm really excited about is that Christina is going to be making it possible for people like us, us folks who want to learn from her, to experience some lovely products that you have discovered that you love and use in your home. And we're going to
Yeah,
be able to like have some connection to
I
these.
am launching a little shop as my own personal protest against Amazon and mass manufacturing. And I've sought out some really cool artisans who are women, who are LGBTQ, who are BIPOC, who are basically anybody who's ever been harmed by the patriarchy. And so I have some beautiful things that I've been using in my home that I will be putting into a little teeny shop, which is hopefully going to be launched any week now.
Yay!
So
I'm
I'll
so
make sure to give you the
excited.
link for that too.
Yeah, once that's up, just get back to the show notes here because that link will eventually be here. But it has been a treat having you on and just getting to hear how you are realistically like adding these things to your life and how you have just been able to create a life where you feel like what you said, like everybody wants to be at home and like this is your sanctuary and just reclaiming that space. And I'm excited to see what you put in your shop. I'm excited to see the next videos that you put out and your next letters. You are an inspiration, and I'm excited to continue to be inspired by you. So thank you for coming on here.
Kat, thank you so much. I love this podcast. I love this space that you're creating here. And it's just such a pleasure to be here and chat with you.
Thank you. And tell those kids I said thank you too for letting you have me, for me letting me have you.
I gotta go take them out for frozen yogurt now.
Go bribe those babies. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.